Moms cannot be getting good sleep. They just went through a long birth process. They might be breastfeeding their child, so they're sitting there doing that a lot, which is depleting and taking a lot of the nutrients away, and then they're not getting the nutrients.
You're listening to the Integrative Medica podcast with Dr. Jake, a licensed naturopathic doctor who will show you how to tap into your body's natural ability to heal your health issue and improve your symptoms quickly without harmful drugs or devastating surgeries. So pour some tea, get comfortable where you are, and enjoy this healing episode.
The first episode that we're recording is going to be about adrenal fatigue. But before we get into adrenal fatigue, Dr. Jake, great to have you in the studio today. Hopefully you're not adrenal fatigued yourself and you're ready for a good show.
I should be good. Yeah. Didn't get much sleep last night. I have a baby that's keeping me up, but I think I'm doing good.
Hopefully it's your baby.
It is my baby. I hope, at least my wife tells me that.
Yeah. Kind of hope all that's going. That's great to know that you're kind of doing the dad thing, because I think so much of us out there listening are doing the mom thing and the dad thing. And I see you have a lot of kids coming into your office. Do you treat kids as part of a regular basis?
I definitely do. Yeah, I treat kids. I treat more adults, but I treat a lot of kids too.
I would love to see, so are your kids coming? You're like, my kid's not falling asleep at night, so you kind of give treatment to your own kid to make them fall asleep. Have you ever done
all
that?
the time?
Yeah, I guess that's better than giving them Benadryl.
It is, yeah.
I've definitely been there myself. You know, early parenting, you're kind of like, is there some melatonin that we could give these guys to just get them? How many kids do you have?
I have 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
Lots of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, living that Salt Lake life, I guess.
Yep, I'm following that typical vibe, even though I'm getting in the big family even for Salt Lake now.
I noticed for us too, we have 4, and we thought that was like awesome. And in California, it's almost criminal. Like you're almost not allowed.
Yeah, you're ruining the planet or something.
Yeah.
Right?
They don't make any parking spaces big enough for the SUV. You know, the parking spaces are only big enough for, a tiny little electric vehicle or whatever the case may be. But you know, when the kids were brand new, we've always been really focused on living a wholeness, wellness life with them. You know, they do cry and they do stuff like that. And you're tempted to kind of like, throw some kids melatonin at them to just train their brains to go to bed. Does that fall under bad parenting, good parenting, or we just don't talk about it at family reunions?
I think it's frustration parenting. What I mean by that is you want them to sleep. It's not necessarily the healthiest thing to help them sleep with melatonin, because you want them to produce their own melatonin production. Because if you give them melatonin, most parents don't know this, is they're likely going to need melatonin the rest of their lives. Try to figure things out without going that route. Sometimes you absolutely need to, and the kids won't fall asleep, and you need to sleep and they need to sleep. So I don't judge parents that have to do that, but try other things first.
Yeah, that's good. And we can, of course, check out more on your website for that. It's a good segue for our topic today, because we're going to be talking about adrenal fatigue. And this is sort of a big conversation that we're going to have today. You had shared some things with me off screen about why, this is such a passion topic for you. Share with our listening audience a little bit why you're so passionate about this topic of adrenal fatigue.
So I'm so passionate about it because it's a big epidemic, and a lot of doctors aren't looking into this. A lot of people just say it's normal to be tired when you had a baby and you have lots of kids and you're really busy and not sleeping well at night. And that's not necessarily, I guess it is normal, but it's not ideal. A lot of people get adrenal fatigue when they are working really hard, working long nights, not getting enough sleep. Sometimes I call it mommy syndrome, because moms are overworked all the time. They're taking care of the kids. They might be working. They're cleaning the clothes. They're doing all kinds of things that are keeping them busy. And then they're trying to take care of their husbands too, which are really needy. It's a burnout syndrome. You produce too much cortisol, your adrenal glands decide, hey, I'm not going to make cortisol anymore. And then you're tired all the time, because cortisol is what we need to make energy, increase focus. It's what makes us wake up.
So what does that look like then when we talk about adrenal fatigue? Is this something that you can go get a blood test for? Or are there like common symptoms where if you're experiencing A, B, and C, you have adrenal fatigue? Talk to us about like that process.
Yeah, you can do blood tests for it. My favorite way is actually a salivary test. The reason is cortisol is a stress hormone. So a lot of people, when they see a needle, get kind of stressed. And when they get poked, they get a little stressed. So that's going to change your cortisol a little bit when you get a blood test. Plus, I like to check your cortisol 4 times throughout the day, because your cortisol changes throughout the day. Morning, evening, nighttime, and afternoon. It all is different. So you're supposed to make a lot in the morning. You're supposed to not make much before you go to bed. And then between the day, it waxes and wanes. So I like to do a cortisol test via the saliva. It's very easy. You spit in this little tube 4 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime. And then we get a great result for that.
who gets adrenal fatigue and what are they going to experience? You talked a little bit about mommy syndrome. Dig into that, because if someone's listening and they're thinking, I want them to think, oh, maybe I have adrenal fatigue. Like, what does that look like? What are some of the symptoms? How do we know? And that leads us to next steps.
A lot of people get adrenal fatigue. It's extremely common. So I say moms because I see a lot of moms that are getting adrenal fatigue and getting really a lot of chronic fatigue because their adrenals are shot. What does this look like? Moms cannot be getting good sleep. They just went through a long birth process. They might be breastfeeding their child, so they're sitting there doing that a lot, which is depleting and taking a lot of the nutrients away. And then they're not getting the nutrients, and then they're trying to take care of their other kids or take care of that kid or take care of their husband, or they might be cooking, etc. I mean, dads will get this too. I mean, they're really busy taking care of the kid and taking care of their wife. There's that piece. But other people that get it, people that work long hours, or people that have really stressful jobs, or people that just have stressful lives, that they get overstressed when they are in certain situations. So people with a lot of anxiety, I see, get a lot of adrenal fatigue because they're constantly on edge. They're constantly running away from the bear, so to speak. They're running away from the bear forever, and they're never getting away from the bear because they're always on edge. Main people that get it are moms, dads, high functioning individuals, people that are anxious all the time. People that aren't sleeping very well are probably the main people that are at risk to getting adrenal fatigue.
So we're talking about adrenal fatigue. You know, what you're explaining a lot sounds like the American lifestyle to me, right? Where you're just constantly on the go. And some of this could be good stress, right? Because like if you're talking about like soccer practice or church or like theater, like these are things that we might love to do, but do they still contribute to this adrenal fatigue? Is there such a thing as good stress and bad stress?
I think it's how you deal with the stress. So there's people that can do all these things that I was talking about, that work extremely hard, that work long hours, that have maybe a business and they're constantly working all the time, or a mom that can deal with it well. So it's just how you deal with that specific stress. Now, anyone that's overdoing it, that's never calming down, they're going to get adrenal fatigue. But there's some people that really aren't doing as much as some other people that are getting adrenal fatigue. So it's a lot about the mindset and how you deal with that and how stressed you are when you're dealing with that specific event that you're dealing with.
You're talking about the stress event, like whether it's the football game or the school.
Let's say the stress event. Yeah, maybe soccer can cause someone to get adrenal fatigue. I mean, soccer can be pretty intense. You are constantly going to practices, and then you want your kid to do well. So you're always trying to go out there and practice with them all the time. And that's just one piece. And then you have all these other things that you're dealing with. But like I said, it's all about the mindset of how you're dealing with it. If you're really anxious and stressed about what you're dealing with, that's going to put a lot of stress on your adrenal glands. And then that's going to lead to adrenal fatigue in the future.
So it sounds like a cycle, right? Where you've got like this stressor, but then you stress out about the stressor.
Exactly.
And this is just, I mean, that's me. I don't know if it described any of you folks out there, but that just described me to a T, even in this cancer battle right now. It's like, it's the stress of fighting cancer and then worrying if what you're doing is actually, is actually working. So let's kind of dig into that mindset and give our listeners something to move with and work forward on. First of all, let's talk about what this looks like. So how do you know if you potentially have adrenal fatigue? What are the symptoms you're going through?
So the symptoms of adrenal fatigue is you're going to be tired. You can either be wired and tired, meaning you can't sleep, but you're tired all the time, or you can sleep great and all you do is want to sleep all the time. You could have dizziness and lightheadedness, especially people that stand up really quickly and they get lightheaded and dizzy. Many times you could have certain cravings, especially for salty foods and sweet foods when you have adrenal fatigue. Many people can have a lot of difficulty sleeping at night when they have that. That's more when I talk about difficulty sleeping at night, there's different stages. So let's dive into that. There's stage 1, which is normal. Let's say you run from the bear and you get away from the bear and you chill out and nothing happens from that. You're all good. There's stage 2 that you are constantly running away from the bear all the time. So you're always overstimulated. So you're going to be tired, but you're going to be anxious and you're not going to be sleeping at night very well. And then there's stage 3 is you ran from the bear and you've been running forever and you don't care anymore and you don't care if that bear catches you. And you're tired all the time and you can sleep all the time. It's really hard to function.
Are these things that people are slowly notice them, or is it like shocking? Like one day you wake up and you're like, I have adrenal fatigue. Or is it one day
Usually
you
no.
wake up and you're like, man, for the last 2 weeks, like I haven't felt any. Is there a motivation issue there too, you know?
It's a huge gradual process. It's usually not night and day. I was really energetic and now I'm not. It's a gradual process, gradually decreasing your energy. And then you get to a point that you just have a hard time functioning. So usually people don't really notice what's going on. People start researching things and start finding out about adrenal fatigue and look up the symptoms. And they're like, yeah, that's me to a T.
Do the differences in the stages determine the type of treatment that you should pursue?
Yeah, it changes the treatment a lot. Stage 2, stage 3 are treated differently.
Okay, let's kind of run through those then so that anybody listening kind of has a good course of action. First of all, let's talk about some of the sort of the street medications. And I say that just kind of colloquially, but like, you know, caffeine, right? Extra Starbucks. Like what are some of the right now medications that people with adrenal fatigue are sort of seeking out before they go see a doctor?
So yeah, the big thing that they're doing is usually going after caffeine. They're drinking a lot of coffee. They're drinking a lot of green tea, doing a lot of pre-workout, or they're doing caffeine pills, or they might go to the big guns like using Adderall or other methamphetamines, or they might go with big things like cocaine to give them a little bit of energy. So it just depends on what route. But most people are going for the caffeine, and probably the Adderall is very common in this group too, because they want to focus, they want to get energy, and they aren't getting things done. So they go to the doctor, and their doctor's like, hey, we got Adderall that can do that for you. So they take that. But again, caffeine and Adderall just make your adrenal fatigue worse.
That's sort of like the self-medication method. I mean, I guess there's some prescription sort of involved.
Adderall is you're going to the doctor, but most doctors have no problem prescribing it. You say you want Adderall, usually they're going to give it to you, but you have to do that through a doctor. But a street medication would be more like the caffeine. That's probably the most common thing people are going for, is several different types of caffeine, even though they might not be thinking they're drinking caffeine, like a pre-workout or a rock star, or to give them that little energy boost. 5-hour energy too, you know, get the B vitamins. But again, that has a lot of caffeine in it also.
You also brought up cocaine, which I think is interesting because we say it, there's almost a sense of laughter, like maybe in a 1%, coming from sort of the middle class place in Orange County that I came from. That's a very real scenario with housewives and even dads like seeking some of this stuff out on the sidelines. Is there a real difference between a street solution and an Adderall solution, or are they both equally bad for you?
They're both equally bad for you. Just one you feel more comfortable with because the doctor prescribed it, but both are going to be addictive. Both are going to be very difficult to get off, and you're going to have to take more and more because, again, it's making that cause of what's causing you to be tired. It's overstimulating the body. That continuous overstimulation will tax your adrenal glands and decrease your cortisol production, and then you have to keep on taking more stimulants.
Yeah.
Whatever stimulant that may be, Adderall, caffeine, cocaine, or whatever.
That just sounds like my early 20s. I just love this topic.
Yeah,
and I'm
very common.
Good. So let's talk a little bit. I want to get into the integrative approach and what that really means, because I think people hear integrative, they hear natural and wellness, and there's a bias that kind of comes on top. It can't be as effective. But in order to really understand that, first walk us through what the doctor's going to say. Like, what is the conventional medicine approach to adrenal fatigue? Is there even an approach? Like, walk us through what your doctor's going to do.
So the conventional doctor, they don't really look into adrenal fatigue very much, because what they are going to do is they're going to dive into the severe forms of adrenal disease. They're going to look at Addison's disease or Cushing's disease, and they don't think there's anything in between. So Addison's disease is usually an autoimmune condition that attacks the adrenal glands and suppresses cortisol production, and you really need to take like a hydrocortisone or something to be able to get your cortisol up. Cushing's disease is you have like a tumor or other issue going on that's overstimulating your cortisol production, and they need to do something to suppress that. So they don't really look at adrenal fatigue very much. They don't really think it's real for some reason, because there's no in-between there. And there's a definite in-between. And a lot of people are in that in-between, and they're just not getting the help they want, and they're just staying tired all the time or over-medicating on all these stimulants because they have this adrenal fatigue, and no one's really finding it out.
What drugs are they diagnosing to treat the symptoms?
Like I said, with Addison's disease, they just give you cortisol, which is hydrocortisone. With Cushing's disease, they're going to give you a specific medication to suppress that cortisol production, or it can be caused by a tumor, and they're going to remove that tumor to take care of it. Very few people have these conditions. These are rare conditions. I would say probably about 30% of the population has adrenal fatigue.
Wow. What is the integrative approach then? If we know that the doctor's approach is going to be a prescription-based approach that's going to hit your symptoms, but never really attack that root cause of overstimulating the body, then what is the integrative approach?
So the integrative approach to adrenal fatigue is identify what is the cause of that specific adrenal fatigue, try to eliminate some of those stressors that are going on in the body is the first thing we got to go for. And we got to improve the individual's diet. Sometimes people aren't going to be able to leave that stressful event, or they're not going to be able to leave their family or whatever. But we talk about ways that we can deal with that, or ways that we can give some free time to that specific individual to meditate or do something they love, because a lot of times they're not doing that. But then we also dive into the dietary piece. A lot of people are giving them adrenal fatigue because when they have adrenal fatigue, they're eating tons of sugar all the time. Because again, that gives them their little pick-me-up. And then they have the pick-me-up, they crash, the pick-me-up and crash. So we talk about what you really need to do is limit the sugar intake. You need to eat more protein in the morning, more protein and fat. And then in the evening, you could eat more of your complex carbohydrates, which doesn't mean you're eating a lot of cake or pie. This just means you can eat some bread or maybe a little bit of pasta or something at the evening. But you don't want to eat a bagel and orange juice in the morning because that's going to keep you tired all the time. And what happens is when you eat sugar, you decrease your cortisol response. When you eat protein, you increase your cortisol response. So we want a lot of cortisol in the morning. So we eat protein, we're going to increase that. We want to start decreasing our cortisol response in the evening. So eating some carbohydrates will decrease that response. So that's the kind of the dietary part. And then we prescribe several different herbs or nutrients to support the adrenal glands depending on what stage they're in. So stage 2, they're overstimulated. They're anxious, wired, but tired type of individual. What we need to do is calm that cortisol response. And we give some herbs that are more calming and nutrients that are calming to the adrenal glands. And we prescribe several nutrients to help nourish the adrenal glands, like B vitamins and vitamin C and selenium, DHEA to help nourish those adrenal glands. And then we give herbs to calm down that cortisol response. So then we have stage 3 is they're not producing cortisol at all, very little. They're producing enough to function, but they're not feeling very well. They're not able to wake up in the morning because they're so tired, and then they're just tired all day long. So what we do for that is we give some cortisol to increase that. So we give herbs usually to start, like maybe adrenal extract or some herbs that are stimulatory to the adrenal glands. They stimulate that cortisol response. If we need to, sometimes for people that are in a severe state, we give low dose hydrocortisone, meaning we give it in the physiological dose that your body would naturally make, which is completely different than what a lot of doctors give hydrocortisone for. So we physiologically do that, and it has no immunosuppressive effect on it to get those people producing their cortisol again. And again, all stages need to follow that mental and dietary approach, and then it changes a little bit based on if we want to decrease cortisol or increase cortisol based on the stage.
A lot of great questions I have for you coming up. And if you guys have questions you want to ask Dr. Jake or one of his doctors, go to our Facebook group on Facebook, search for Integrative Medica, click on groups and join the group. A couple questions that I have is, what about the person that says, oh, I can't do that because I have X, Y, and Z diet? How do you balance an adrenal fatigue treatment plan with some dietary restrictions that might be to something unrelated?
Are you saying maybe someone's eating a vegan diet and they can't have eggs in the morning?
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Yeah. And they perceive that as now a challenge to getting better.
So usually we just need to help them understand that you can get protein from a lot of other sources. So they could get a vegan protein shake that's high in pea protein or rice protein. So you get that in the morning. They could have nut butters in the morning, like almond or a good quality peanut butter, or they could have raw nuts in the morning with a little bit of dry fruit. So that's that in that category. And then people can be on all kinds of different diets, let's say like the paleo or ketogenic diet. But the paleo and ketogenic diet are usually pretty good diets for adrenal fatigue, except we just need to get a little bit more carbohydrate in the evening so people decrease that cortisol response. So it's just about modifying their diet a little bit to make it fit their specific situation. And what I do is sit down and really talk in detail why they're following the specific diet, maybe help them understand maybe their diet's not the best thing for them, or help them understand that we can make changes with the diet that you're following. Maybe it's for religious things, or you want to follow a diet because you love animals, or you want to follow this diet because you want to lose a lot of weight. We can make modifications as needed. But what I notice with a lot of people they're following a certain diet because they think it's the healthiest thing for them, but it might not necessarily be the healthiest thing for their specific bodies at that time. And we might be able to heal up their adrenal glands and get them back onto that diet in the future.
I see that a lot in the cancer community where I hear people saying like, oh, I could never do that, right? Like, nope, I gotta have my sugary creamer in the morning with a giant bagel. I gotta do that. But other than that, I want to get better from cancer. Or other than that, I want to get better from adrenal fatigue, whatever the case might be. How do you approach that person? Like, what do you say to that person to get them to care enough to move forward on this treatment plan?
So what I help them understand is they feel the way they do is because it's out of habit. It's what they've been doing ever since they were a little kid. Let's say they're 50 years old. They've been eating the same type of diet their entire lives. So they don't understand that there is different food out there that is really tasty and good. And the more you eat of a certain food, the more you're going to like that food. And the more you don't eat sugar, the less you really crave sugar over time. For me, example, I used to love donuts. I don't even know the last time I ate donuts. And when I pass by the donut aisle, I don't crave donuts anymore. It doesn't even sound good to me. And last time I ate donuts, it didn't taste as good as I remembered because sugar is a very addictive. It increases dopamine in your brain. When you continue to eat that sugar, you're going to crave all that sugar all the time because you're addicted to it. But when you take it away and you go through kind of the little withdrawals of going off sugar for 3 or 4 days, you don't have that addictive nature anymore. It goes away. Your taste changes. Things are going to taste too sweet. You're not going to feel great when you eat the sugar. It's a process, and they just need to understand that you will get past that process. It's going to be hard in the very beginning, but when you get past that, you're going to feel fantastic. And you're not going to be like you're not eating good food because your tastes are going to change and you're going to love a variety of foods. And you're going to find out that the food you're eating right now is kind of bland. Yeah. And when you start eating a more variety of foods, man, it opens up so many different doors and you start loving food in a completely different way.
Maybe loving yourself too, loving the way you feel after eating some of these foods. I really, it breaks my heart to see people that they could get better by eating certain foods, but then they're stuck in this, I could never do that. I got to eat my XYZ or whatever the case might be. I want to talk about your process for diagnosing and sort of treating this. Is a really interesting process. So I want to make sure you guys stick around for that. But I also kind of wanted to ask you this question about, do you think, is adrenal fatigue something that's going to stay with you forever, or is it something that gets better? Like you can get better and then you're over it. You're cured from it essentially.
Yeah, you definitely do get over it, but you do need to change some lifestyle habits, how you deal with certain situations, how you eat. And if you make those changes, adrenal fatigue will never come back. But let's say you get back to your old habits of overexerting yourself and not making time for yourself, or not working on how you deal with certain situations, that you don't get chronically stressed and ruminate about that specific situation over and over, because that's going to tax the adrenal glands. In the process, we teach you how to deal with situations, how to eat appropriately, and what nutrients to take to keep on nourishing it, and what herbs to take. And over time, you're not going to have to take these nutrient and herbs, and you just have to eat a good diet and try to deal with your stress the best you can. And if you do that, the fatigue goes away and you feel fantastic.
Let's talk about your process, because you have a lengthy sort of questionnaire and that you go through with people. Yeah. When I came to you, like, we were used to telling our doctors what we wanted them to check. I want you to check for this, that, and the other thing, because they wouldn't ask us. But you asked us all of these questions up front. We're like, finally, here's someone that is proactive on this. Walk us through your adrenal fatigue sort of diagnosis process. And if any of you out there, you think you may suffer from this, give Jake a call us, and let's find out. We'll walk you through this and see if we can find a treatment plan for you. Walk us through, Dr. Jake, sort of what is your process for walking a new patient through the curing adrenal fatigue?
So the patient comes in my door and I sit down and talk to the patient for about 45 minutes. I'm going to get a thorough history of what they're dealing with, what type of job they have, how many kids they have, what type of exposures they're having, if they have any type of psychological disorders, or if they have any type of issues dealing with stress or whatever. We dive into that in great detail. I ask a lot of questions to understand if they do have adrenal fatigue. Like, I'm going to ask them if they crave salt, or they have a great craving for sugar. Are they having difficulty sleeping at night? Are they waking up a lot during the night? Are they having any type of digestive issues? Because adrenal fatigue can cause diarrhea or constipation because of the stress overload. I'm going to see if they get lightheaded and dizzy when they stand up. And I'm going to ask several different questions to really dive into what could be the cause of their fatigue, because it's not always adrenal fatigue is the cause of their fatigue. It's quite common. I need to find out if adrenals are an area that we need to look into. And then after I find out, okay, I need to look into adrenal issues, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the diurnal cortisol test, and we're going to do a salivary test, send them home. They spit in these vials morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime. We send those out. We usually get that back in about 7 to 10 days. And then I sit down and talk about what the results we're seeing. And let's say we're seeing too much cortisol in the evening and we're seeing not enough in the morning. I'm going to say, hey, you have stage 2 adrenal fatigue. We need to work on increasing your cortisol in the morning time, and we need to work on decreasing your cortisol at night. So we're able to get your energy throughout the day, and then we're able to help you sleep at night. And let's say someone comes back and they have low cortisol throughout the entire day, and that's stage 3, and we need to work on stimulating that cortisol response through nutrients and herbs, or maybe a medication like hydrocortisone to get that cortisol up again. And then we're going to work on the mental and dietary things, so you don't have to depend upon these things forever. And over time, the adrenal glands will heal. In about 6 months to a year, typically people's adrenal glands will heal, and they'll be back to their normal selves of having great energy and be able to function really well, not being brain fogged, and et cetera.
That sounds great. So 6 months to a year, and you could be in a place where you're moving on and you're back to normal. And that means that you can go back to eating donuts again, right?
Periodically.
Okay, good. I'm throwing softballs at you. I'm trying to get one past you, but I went through the same donut sort of crush, like I don't really care for donuts, but then when you're told you can't have one, now all of a sudden you want one again. Yeah. And I recently took my kids out to get a donut, and it's like I got in there and I was like, I don't even want this stuff. In fact, I don't want you kids eating this stuff. Like, let's get out of here and go to a broccoli shop or something like that. But, of course, I had to
Good luck doing that.
Yeah, exactly. They were kind of not into that. So really great information on chronic fatigue and adrenals today, Jake. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, can you walk us through a story of someone who came to you with adrenal fatigue and like their happy ending?
I have one that's coming into me right now. She was a highly active individual, business owner, and also loved to work out. So she was working all day and managing her employees. And then after that, she would go and bike for about 2 or 3 hours. She loved doing that. So she was burning her body at both ends. She was mentally exerting herself, and then she was physically exerting herself. She did this for about 5 to 6 years. And then she got to a point that she was tired all the time. She couldn't really perform her work very well. She was tired all the time. She was brain fogged. She was lightheaded and dizzy. She couldn't work out anymore, which is kind of what decreased the stress for her. Whenever she worked out, she was completely exhausted and just had to go to sleep, and she couldn't get anything done. That's when she came into me. She told me what was going on. So we asked thorough questions like we discussed before to identify that the adrenals were an issue. So we ordered that diurnal cortisol test, found out that she was in stage 2 of adrenal fatigue. She wasn't quite stage 3 yet. She was still in the wired but tired. She was anxious but tired all the time. And we gave her, she was producing too much cortisol at night and not enough cortisol in the morning. So we boosted up her cortisol in the morning and the afternoon. And then we gave some supplements to decrease her cortisol at nighttime. And then we modified her diet. We talked about her that we needed to increase her protein intake in the morning and the afternoon, and then increase the carbohydrate intake in the evening. And then we talked about some sleep hygiene things, some things to help her sleep. We gave her some magnesium to calm her brain down. We gave some other things to calm her anxiety down, because it's not all about just the adrenal glands. We need to work on the neurotransmitters too. So we worked on calming her brain down too. So she responded quite quickly. About after 6 weeks, she was telling me that she was a new person. She was back to biking again. Wow. We did talk about that she shouldn't probably do 120 milers every 2 months or so, because that will deplete her body. But we talked about doing good exercise, not overexerting it, maybe an hour, maybe 2 max of exercising. She's in the point that she feels great. She has the energy. She doesn't have the brain fog. She's able to get her work done. She's able to take care of her kids, and she's able to be back to biking of something that she loved again. She's still taking some of the supplements. She's still just been going 3 months now, but I expect in about 3 months, we're going to take her off the supplements and she's going to be good to go.
So is there like a decrease in the amount of treatment? Is this like an outpatient thing mostly, where you provide a plan and then the patient sort of lives it?
Yeah, I provide a plan, and then I keep on checking in with her or other patients throughout the year to see how things are going, if she's managing things well. I like to check in with my patients because sometimes they're going to go off the bandwagon and forget about what we talked about. So I like to check in with them probably every 3 months at least, so they know that I'm going to be looking at what they're doing and they're still following things okay. And usually after a year, they have their routine down, and it's really not difficult for them. And I just check in with them every year or two to make sure they're still on the right track.
So what do you say to that person that's listening to you right now and they think they might have adrenal fatigue, or they're at least they're struggling? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What do you say to that person right now?
You need to find someone that's actually going to be able to look at this effectively and actually understand what adrenal fatigue is, because a lot of doctors don't understand it, or they might understand it, but they don't know how to treat it effectively. So you need to find a doctor that has a lot of experience of dealing with it. You can kind of interview them and ask them some questions, maybe what you've learned here today, to get an idea if they know what they're talking about or they don't about adrenal fatigue. You don't have to deal with this the rest of your life. It's normal, but it's definitely not ideal. It's not the life you want to live. I'm sure a lot of you out there have a lot of friends that are dealing with the same thing that you are. And you're just like, I guess this is just how it is to when I get in my 30s or 40s to be tired all the time. But that's not the truth at all. You could get to the place of having more energy than you've ever had before by just changing up your diet, working on some of the things you deal with, your stressors, and healing up those adrenal glands. You're going to get back to where you were or even better.
Hey, Dr. Jake, thank you for your time today. And if you enjoyed the show, then do us a favor and leave a review. It helps more people to find the show, which could save their life. And remember, this is a podcast and should not replace personalized attention from a medical professional like Dr. Jake. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, cancer of any stage, or a life-changing illness, visit our website today and schedule a virtual appointment with one of our doctors who can lead you to a treatment plan in your area. That's integrativemedica.com. Integrative, MEDICA.com.
Thank you for listening to the Integrative Medica podcast with Dr. Jake. To hear past episodes and get alerts for the future, subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform and be sure to follow us on YouTube as well. Just search for Integrative Medica with Dr. Jake.